Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. I'm really hoping this is going out live because we had a little issue a couple of minutes ago on the first attempt of a live stream. I think we just have kind of vacation brain happening. I'm here with Sarah.
Hi.
And oh yay, I can see that things are happening on the monitor. That's such a relief. We are going to paint this crab. And I have all the information you need in the video description, but I will go over the colors that we're using. We are going to use the Turner watercolors, and I did put a link in the video description to these paints from our sponsor, jerrysartorama.com. The set of 18 I'm using today are on sale for $19.99. They have a list value of $150, so it's a really great deal. And the palette that I have them in is a Zoltan Sabo palette, and I also linked that up too because a lot of you guys have asked me about it. I also have a link to the pattern in case you want to print it out and trace it and save yourself a little time. And the colors that we're going to be using today are burnt sienna, yellow ochre, permanent gamboge. You can use any warm yellow you have, such as a cad yellow deep or Indian yellow. Permanent scarlet, you can use any warm red you have, such as a cad red or a vermilion or any sort of like nice warm kind of orangey leaning red. We're going to use ultramarine and also turquoise blue. You could also use cobalt teal. I believe it's the same pigment either way, just a different name of the Turner colors. And we're just going to get right into it since we started a few minutes late. I'm going to begin by flicking some water onto my paper because I want it to have kind of a very loose feeling to it. Did you have a question? Do we have any questions coming in?
Not yet.
Okay. I find that by kind of wetting the paper like this, I get some unexpected bleeding of the colors, and I just think it looks kind of nice. So I also want to put a few big blobs of just water. I'm going to start off with, I'm not sure if I want a background in this yet, so I'm just going to start off with painting some of these colors in. I want to kind of keep my colors vivid because I know that as they mix, they're going to dull down. So I've got the gamboge, and I'm going to go in first, kind of in the crown area of the crab's head and paint that in. I'm using a number 12 mimic squirrel, which is a faux squirrel. And I have the value set, so that has a lot of really great brushes in it if you're trying to decide what to get. They also have a try it deal where you can get a couple brushes for like a buck or two. So if you're on the fence and you want to try it out, you can do that. And a little bit of burnt sienna here for the bottom part of this in between the eyes facial area. And I think I actually want to add a little bit of ultramarine into the burnt sienna. I'm mixing it a little bit on the palette so I can just kind of drop that color in and let it do its thing. And if you do have any questions while we're going along here, just type the word question in all caps, and Sarah will be able to catch it easily and ask me the question. But all the products are linked in the video description, so if you have a question about that, you can just check out the links, and hopefully that will be helpful. I'm also going to add a little yellow ochre in here because I feel like the gamboge is a little too bright and transparent, and this is going to make it a little bit more earthy. And I'm going to go in over here with some of that yellow ochre on my brush. Don't worry if any bleeds into the background. We kind of want that effect a little bit. That's why we flick to the water on. Get a little bleeding there. I think it looks kind of cool. I'm going to mix up some dark with my ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Oh, yeah, we have 211 people in there.
Yes.
That first time we went live and it showed that we were going, but there were no people. I'm like, I know there are people because they're chatting. What is going on? I've never had that happen before. It's always something new in YouTube. And there's these kind of like dark stripes on the crab's back, and I'm just loosely painting them in and just letting the paint kind of flow where it wants to. This is a fun technique to do anytime you're doing some sort of like nautical picture because it gives you that kind of like splashy, wet look that it kind of conveys the mood of the piece, even if it's not conveying the actual image representationally. A little burnt sienna up at the top here. It's okay to leave the white peeking here and there because it's going to give you a little bit of sparkle and interest. Now I have a puddle there. I don't think I want that puddle, so I'm just going to dry my brush off and set it in there and soak up the extra water. Since we had that false start, I can't remember what we talked about. We were talking for a few minutes before we realized nothing was happening.
Oh, I think you were just going over like the links and paints and stuff like that.
Okay. So hopefully I covered everything. I'm taking a little bit of this turquoise and I'm going to add this into the bottom part of the shell here, the body part. It's such a pretty color. I really like it because it's very subtle, but it's also very clean and it granulates well, which means when you're mixing it with other colors, and especially if you're using it in a really wet wash, the pigment will settle kind of funny and you'll get this kind of little pockets of texture, which is just a really fun and neat effect.
We have a question about Van Gogh watercolor and your thoughts about the brand.
Oh, they're made by the same company that makes Rembrandt. They are a fantastic student paint. And a lot of people actually consider them a professional paint, even though that's the lower grade range of, I think it's Royal Talons paints. They're fantastic. They're really a great buy for the buck. There's a link to the reference photo that I'm using from Pixabay, which is a wonderful public domain and copyright-free website. If you want to check that out, I really recommend it. And you can print off a large, like high-resolution copy of this if you want to have it to look at while you're working and you don't want to, you know, just have it open on your computer. And that way you can kind of help guide your color placement. I did a review on those Van Gogh paints as well on my channel if anybody wants a little bit more information. See it side by side with some other brands. I think they're a little bit better than Cotman even. I think they're kind of like right up there with Grumbacher Academy. They're probably that and Van Gogh probably my favorite student grade paints. It's so funny how like living crabs have so many different colors in their shell, you know, and after you cook them, they all like, don't they all turn red just like a lobster?
I think so, yeah. And they taste delicious.
Oh, do they?
Oh, I love crab meat. Love it. Oh, delicious.
You know, fun fact, a lot of times at Chinese restaurants, they don't use crab in their crab rangoons.
It's the fake crab meat.
But sometimes it's actually like completely vegetarian, like the Fresh Ginger out in Hamden. Their crab rangoons are actually vegetarian.
Yep.
Not vegan because of the cream cheese, but I thought that was interesting. Because Lila always liked crab rangoons, and actually she can eat them.
Yes. Oh, that's exciting. I love crab rangoons. Kathy Regalado, what student grade watercolor do you recommend?
Well, we just talked about the Van Gogh. That's a great brand. There's another really good brand. Well, there's this Cotman, which is really easy to find, and that's what I teach my adult students with. There's Grumbacher Academy, which is really nice and fairly easy to find in the United States anyway. There is Sonnet, which is harder to find, but it's the student grade by the company that makes Yarka and White Nights, and that's fantastic. Light fastness is not so hot on that one, though, but the colors are really bright. Prima, their watercolor confections, the tropical set's really great for a beginner student. Mission Silver Class, because like you've probably heard of Mission Gold, the Silver Class is a great student grade paint, but I'll have to tell you, it's kind of hard to find and it is more expensive than other student grades. So, you know, I think I would just pony it for the Gold Class because it's easier to find and it's not that much of a price difference. What I'm doing here is I'm just going around and popping in that gamboge, any place I see a fairly bright yellow area so that I kind of can keep that preserved. And on this paper, this is the Langton Prestige, which I got as a trial. Like I got some 8 little ATCs of that as a trial, and I just love the paper so much that I bought some 22-inch by 30-inch sheets, and I tore it down. This is an 1/8 of a sheet. So usually buying your paper in big sheets like that is more economical because you get a lot, like, you know, square foot of paper, you get a lot more than going with pads or blocks if you have places to store it and you don't mind tearing it down.
Luca Ryder, what are some beginner art supplies you would recommend?
It depends on what you're interested in painting, really. Or
Luca is 10.
Luca is 10. I would probably try to go for a kit that had a bunch of different. Oh, there's a kit by Royal and Langnickel, and it has like 12 watercolors, 12 oil paints, 12 acrylics. It has a few brushes for each different medium, and it's got a little easel where everything can be stored in. That's what I got my daughter Lila, who's very into art, because I knew it was going to keep everything together and she'd be able to try a little bit of everything. And then you could just replace what you use. So if you use your acrylics, buy big tubes of the colors that you actually use. And I think there's also pastels, like oil pastels and soft pastels and colored pencils. And it was only about, it was under $100. And that with the easel, I mean, it's definitely worth the money. I think I've even seen it for less than that. And I'm pretty sure Jerry's has it. If you just Google like I think it's like all art kit or something like that, you'll see it. Now I'm going in with a Scarlet, and I'm just kind of dabbing it in, and I'm going to let it mix with the colors I already have. You can leave little gaps if you don't want certain colors to mix. I'm going to make a nice big puddle of it so that I can keep dipping into that and have nice juicy paint ready to go.
Chris Bushnell, I always have problems with thick, heavy lines when using carbon paper to trace or using a light box. I assume you need thick lines that will show on the camera.
Yes, I make mine much darker so that you can see them. I wouldn't put them on this darkly otherwise. I find that my camera will tend to, especially the webcam, will want to wash out the lines, so I have to do them extra dark. But the lines don't really bother me. You can always trace them on with a watercolor pencil. Like you could use like a burnt sienna or a yellow ochre color pencil, so it's dark enough that you can see it, but a lot of those colors will end up getting washed out.
All right, I'll be back.
Sure.
Chewy's having intestinal distress. She gave me the look. I'll be back.
I'm taking a little bit of ultramarine blue here, and I'm just going to go ahead and put it in on its own. I'm going to have to mix it in with a little bit of the Scarlet, I think, because it's a little too blue on its own. Let those colors float. These brushes are really absorbent, so they're going to hold a lot of paint, which makes it really good for this technique where I'm kind of using those wet pockets of color to let my colors float and blend around. So I'm definitely, you definitely would want a juicy brush for that. I'm almost kind of doing this like a paint by number. I'm looking at my reference photo, which you can check out in the video description. I have it linked up. And I'm just saying, where do I see this color? Where do I see that color? And that's kind of how I'm placing it in. And notice I'm not using black for any shadows. I'm mixing everything with colors I already have. But since we have 6 colors here, there's plenty to choose from. That was quick. Did she not go outside?
Oh, she went, and then she looked, and then she plopped down in the sunshine. Okay, Chewy. Oh, God. Why do the biggest dogs try and squeeze into the smallest little spots?
It's supposed to be a really nice weekend and week.
Yes, it is. I'll take it.
Yeah, that'll be nice with the kids off from school.
No more snow.
I think every Valentine's Day we have a storm. It seems like every year I'm like, you know, I'm waiting till the last minute because I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to think of something really, really awesome to get my husband for Valentine's Day. So I don't end up getting anything early. And then like the awesome idea doesn't come. So I'm scrambling at the last minute and then there's a snowstorm.
Well, we did nothing on Valentine's Day. In fact, the dog got snuggles. I got nothing.
Oh,
I know.
It's a lot of pressure Valentine's Day.
Mm. It was also on a Tuesday, which is a weird.
Yeah. It's a Tuesday, and everybody was tired from all dealing with all that snow.
I know.
What are you laughing at?
I'm just saying we're all tired from the snow. That's it.
I think this paper has a lot of sizing on it. My paint is staying wet for a good amount of time, so it's making blending into these colors really easy. If your paper is doesn't have a lot of sizing, it's going to dry a lot quicker, and you might have a little difficulty with that.
Lady Leonardo R., what is your favorite professional grade watercolor?
I really like M. Graham, and not to say that that's the best there is, but I really like it. And it happens in the United States, it happens to be a little bit more affordable. It's kind of expensive elsewhere, I think, but if you live in the United States, it's not bad. It's an American-made company, but there are a lot of really good ones. All depends on what you're looking for and what you want to spend. I think I want to mix a little bit of that red and yellow together because I'm getting some colors that are a little too pink almost. Remember to leave little sparkles as you're painting. Leave little bits of lighter area so that you can either glaze over with a lighter color, or you can just leave it as highlights. Did you watch a Super Bowl?
We did. Did you guys watch the Super Bowl on your vacation?
Jason and the kids did. I was really tired from spending the day out in the sun.
We did. Dad came over for a little bit, and
nice.
a friend John had from base, who's was up for the month, came over and watched it with us.
Nice.
And, we were bummed, and then miraculously the Patriots showed up and played the last 4 minutes of the game. No, it wasn't that they weren't playing. They sucked. Kathy Regalado, who was your inspiration to start paint?
Well, I'd always painted as a child. So my parents put me in art lessons, which was wonderful. And I guess probably my art teacher when I was a child was really inspirational because she, didn't let me get away with anything, and pushed me to do my best. And I would say that was good. My parents, obviously, for seeing my desire and pushing me towards it. Not pushing, they just giving me the opportunity to do it. My parents were not push me in any sort of direction type of parents. They definitely let us figure it out for ourselves. You want to make sure you rinse your brush off frequently, even if you're staying in that same color family, because you're going to be picking up kind of the neighboring colors, and that will just keep your work nice and fresh. I'm going to add a little color into that little spot of background there.
Alexandra Manga, have you heard of the portable palette? If not, I think it's something that you would really be interested in for plein air painting. It has 2 water buckets built in. It's from Indiegogo.
I did see that. That looks really awesome. I haven't purchased one because I have so many palettes, but it does look fantastic. I do agree with you there. Kind of like what's happening in the background here. I'm just kind of guided a little bit. I like the idea of these colors just kind of almost like looking like they're being washed away from the crab.
Vanessa Thibault or Thibodeau, depends on where you are, depends on how it's pronounced.
Oh, yeah.
If you already had your primaries and would like to complete a palette, what are the maybe 4 or 5 other color tubes you would consider buying? Oh, Montreal, so it's the French pronunciation. So I took Spanish, so I'll say it wrong. I was never a French person.
I took French, but unfortunately, I don't recall much from high school French. Well, I think for primaries, I like to have 2 versions of each, red, yellow, and blue. I like a warm and a cool version of each. So assuming you have a warm red and a cool red and a warm blue and a cool blue and a warm yellow and a cool yellow, I would probably say that I would go for burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and sap green, or an olive green, depending on which. I like Sennelier's olive green an awful lot. I like Emgren sap green, something like that, because that's it is a convenience color. You can mix it, but you would need other primaries to properly mix it. You'd want like a PG7 and a PO36 maybe, to get that really rich earthy green that has the body to it. So I would say those would be what I would go for. But everybody's different. Depending on what you're painting, you might want something different. C.
Wellwood, best watercolor brushes.
I'm really loving these Mimic synthetic squirrels from, they're made by Creative Mark. They're sold at Jerry's Artorama. I like those an awful lot.
Millie Sanchez, how do you know how much sizing the paper has?
It's kind of just something you get used to the more you use paper. Some papers have, like, it seems like Fabriano Artistico has a little less sizing. It seems like this Langton Prestige has a little more sizing. A lot of times wood pulp paper has a lot of sizing in it, probably to make it a little more durable, but it's just something that you kind of get to know as you use your papers more. I think I want to dry this at this point, and then I might do some more splashing and adding more color to it, because I haven't completely decided whether I want to do a background or not on this. So I'm just going to dry it to kind of fix everything at this state.
Dialiala, are there any palettes that you would recommend for college students? I have my own tubes already. I just need something to put them in.
Well, I would say if you're planning on painting in a studio, I would go for a palette that's got like a big palette like this, but I would go for one that had smaller wells around the perimeter and a big flat open space in the middle for mixing. But if you like to travel, I would choose like a small folding palette, something that you can tuck into a backpack easily. So it just depends on what you want to do. You could get a palette, each kind of palette, and then put a little dab of paint in the travel one, and put the rest of it in your big palette. Little tiny travel palettes, I've seen them for like $2 or $3 at Ocean State Job Lot. There's probably other discounters that have them cheap as well.
Ian Jackson, have you seen the new Schminky Horadam watercolor?
I haven't seen any new colors. I saw they have a new granulation spray out that looks interesting.
Keita, have you tried Winsor & Newton's Designer's Gouache? And if not, are you considering reviewing them?
I don't use gouache a ton, so and designer gouache tends not to be that light fast because it doesn't need to be. I'm sure they're as good as any other artist quality brand gouache. So the only thing I would say is that there are brands that are more light fast than Winsor & Newton for gouache. Schminke has a light fast gouache. M. Graham has a light fast gouache. So I think just on that respect, if you're thinking about painting works of art that you want to hang on the wall, I would probably go for something like that versus a traditional designer's gouache, which is designed to be reproduced and then stored away on like a portfolio. So, it just depends on if light fastness is important to the work that you're doing.
Akara T, are you offering any prints yet or plans to do so soon?
I am planning. I've actually printed a few things just to test out my printer, and I am planning on offering my owl fairly soon as a print that we did on a live show a couple weeks ago because it was so popular. So yeah, it's coming. I don't know what I'm going to do for a website, if I'm just going to offer them up on my blog and send out invoices if they sell or what. But yes, it's definitely something I am looking into do sooner rather than later.
Katie McGeady, do you mix different paint manufacturers onto the same palette?
Sure. Sometimes that's always how I used to do it until I was doing it more for a living and doing tutorials for a living. And then I kind of separated them just because I would review a paint and I just have them all in one palette. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Most artists will mix and match because they might love ultramarine blue from Daniel Smith. That's one of my favorite. That's probably my favorite ultramarine blue is Daniel Smith's ultramarine blue. And, you know, so I would put that, and I would put the, you know, the M. Graham colors that I like, and I would put Da Vinci colors that I like. I would definitely mix and match. There's no, even if they use a different binder, like Core uses Aquazol and the other brands use Gum Arabic, it doesn't seem to bother a thing to mix and match them.
Beaton Lowenstein, do you have some good exercises for a new watercolor painter?
I think, you know, I honestly, I would say paint, because I think you'll get kind of bored just practicing your brush strokes. And you're gonna pick up all that, you know, it's muscle memory. You're gonna pick up that practice just by painting.
Penny Mew or Mio, French, so I apologize. Is there a list somewhere of your basic and favorite colors with the pigment numbers?
I don't know if I have the pigment numbers on it, but I do have on my blog, I have if you just Google watercolor basics, you'll see a link to a printable PDF that you can just print out and take to the store with you. I don't think I have the pigment numbers written on that, but they're very customary pigments, very customary colors, so you shouldn't have any problem finding any of them. I'm going to make up a really dark color. I'm using burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And that's going to be for all the like kind of cracks or the little gaps in between the shell pieces come together.
Karen Clark, I love the look of rough torn edges on the paper. Do you use a ruler as a guide and let it tear loosely, or is there more of a technique to it?
I do have a video on how I tear down my watercolor paper, but it's pretty simple. I just take the full sheets and I put them on a clean surface, and I lay a metal ruler down, and I fold it. And then I lay a metal ruler against the fold and I rip it. So you kind of do, I don't know, I like it, especially if I'm trying to deal with a big sheet, I like to have that metal ruler to keep me from tearing where I don't want to tear. And I'm just taking this darker color, and any place I see a dark shadow, I am putting it in there, and I can trace little lines where the shells are coming apart. Oh, Chewy's snoring.
I'm scratching her head. Alexandra Manga, how many drops per pan of glycerin could I use to keep my paints from cracking?
They'll probably only need it if they're student grade paints. I would just put like 2 drops of glycerin and stir it in if the paint's still wet. If not, just put the 2 drops on top and it'll eventually kind of work its way in as you use the paint.
Kathy Regalado, do you have any tips for young and new watercolor? I'm assuming watercolor painters.
Paint. Just paint. Don't worry about anybody else seeing it. If you're shy. I think painting on location is a great exercise because you're usually limited in how long you can spend on something, so it keeps you from fussing with it. I know it can be a little nerve-wracking if you're new to put yourself out there like that, but if you can find some place that's not too busy where you can paint and sketch, it's a really great exercise. But really just painting, that's the best. That's the only thing that's going to make you a better painter. Reading about it's not going to help. I mean, it might help a little bit, but watching videos isn't really going to help. The only thing that's going to make you a good painter is painting.
Bethany Collender, whoops, chat bumped up. What is the best palette for $30, 30-ish, including collection of tubes?
Oh, paints with a palette for $30?
Do they really make anything?
You usually, you buy the tubes and you buy your palette separate unless you're buying a set of pans. Lucas has a set, and you can find that on Jerry's on sale for $30, and it's 12 half pans, and it's a small travel palette, and I have that. I bought the larger set of 48 pans. They're great quality. It's hard to beat for that price. It's hard to beat the Lucas line. they're German-made paint, and they're extremely light, fast, and vivid, and they do tend to be a little bit more on the opaque side, and I think it might be because of the minerals they use versus there's not as many dyes in the line, it seems, as minerals, so they just naturally tend to be a little bit heavier, but you add water to them and they get nice and transparent. I would definitely give that a look, because with the $30, it's going to be harder to beat that. And that's 12 colors, and it has your basic, your warm and cool of each primary, like I recommend. And you get the little palette. I could show you. I don't have my Lucas palette up here, but I can show you what the palette's similar to, because I have several. It's kind of a customary palette that you'd be used to seeing. Let me just finish. I want to get this passageway of color in first, because I don't like to let something partially dry and go back to it, or it will give me hard edges. So I just want to finish that up, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so this is Prima, I think. So it's a set like this. It wouldn't have what's going down the center because I put those in. This is not Lucas, but it's got this kind of palette with a little removable area where you can like have a little extra mixing area. It give you 12 colors, not those 12 because it's, you know, obviously a different brand, but it's a nice little compact rig, and it will take you quite a while to use up those colors. And as you use them up, you can buy a tube of a color to replace it, and then you can go back in and just squirt it in there and let it dry. So now what I want to do is make a darker version of my red. So I'm grabbing that red, Permanent Scarlet. I'm actually going to, I'll slide my palette down so you can see where I'm doing that. I'm actually going to add, I want to mix up a little bit more than that actually. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of ultramarine blue. So then that's just going to keep it from getting too purpley. I don't mind a little bit of purpley, but I don't want it too purpley.
Starshine Soldier, do you have any favorite watercolor crafting magazines?
Oh gosh, there's not that many left anymore.
No, there really isn't.
Trying to think. I think Watercolor Artist is still around, but I was Artist Magazine, and honestly, it just seemed like a lot of filler these days. But I subscribed to it like a year and a half ago, and I just let my subscription run out because I just didn't feel like I was getting the value of what I wanted from a magazine. Yeah, I honestly don't get many magazines anymore, unfortunately, and
well, and the ones that I do aren't craft ones because most of them just aren't great. Like you said, it's a lot of filler, it's a lot of ads, it's a lot of
well, you tear out all the ads and you don't have a magazine. There's nothing else in there. And I understand. I mean, it's expensive, and it's a small market that's going to read them. So I mean, I totally get that. But you know, I just find that I spend half an hour looking at it, and you know, the magazine's, you know, $8 or $10, and it's like I'm not getting my $10 of fun out of it, right. I guess. If you can find some like older ones at a thrift store or something, grab them, because they were better. They used to be a lot better than they are now.
MMAK Daily, how do you keep your colors from getting muddy on your painting?
Well, I dried between layers, and we're using a limited palette. So those two things are going to keep it from getting too muddy while you're working. Did you say on your painting or palette?
Painting.
Painting, yeah. The drying between layers and just kind of not using too many colors is what works. And these are kind of like mid-tone shadows I'm putting down. I just keep looking back at my reference photo and looking where I've got this kind of like purpley brown red, and that's where I'm putting this color.
Terry Lee. Oh boy. Wow. All right, Terry Lee. What beginner watercolor set / palette do you recommend for art journaling, scrapbooking, calligraphy, card making, stamping, and coloring?
You know, for stuff like that where it's more of like a mixed media and craft application, go for what selection of colors you like, but there's some kits by Prima and Jane Davenport that have the colors behave very well. They're lovely to paint with. They're not going to be as light fast as like these or other artists brands, but they are going to suit you very well for the activities that you do. And I would definitely just kind of look at them. I really like the tropical set from Prima. Is probably the most versatile if you want to mix colors, but Decadent Pies is really nice if you like to do a lot of like sketches, outdoor scenery type things. Jane Davenport has like a warm set called Neutrals, which is great if you need skin tone colors, if you do a lot of people. And she's got a Brights, which is good if you do a lot of flowers. But there's no duplication between sets, I find, like between the two Jane Davenports or between all the Primas. So you can kind of, as your budget allows, collect them. And I've seen them for under $20 a set. So, and a lot of times your big box craft stores will have them and you can use a coupon. So it's definitely an affordable way to go if you don't need, you know, fade resistant artist quality.
Kathy Regalado, do you have any mistakes of painting over the years that you wish you hadn't done?
No, because anytime that you've made a mistake, you've learned something from it. So there's no point in crying over spilt paint or crying over wasted paint, because you come out of the experience all the wiser. I'm brightening up the yellow in the face, and that's a permanent gamboge. And some of these colors tend to be a little more on the opaque side. Usually yellows are a more opaque color. And sometimes like your warmer colors tend to be a little more opaque. So if you do find that you need a little bit more robust of a color, you can go right over it with a yellow or a red and notice that it will stand out and it will cover up some of the colors underneath, even though it's technically a transparent watercolor. You can kind of see it right there when I went over that purpley red with that yellow. Just clean that brush as you go, because you will be picking up other colors and you want to keep it nice and fresh. I'm curious to see if the folks in the chat think I should add a background or not.
All right, people, you heard. Lindsay wants your vote. Background? No background.
And I'm thinking this really needs spatters, so. Now I'm going to look for my Maxine's mop, which is my favorite little lifting brush. It's a tiny little stiff filbert. And I'm going to lift out some lighter areas. So I've got a fairly clean, dry paper towel. And while you guys are, the votes are getting cast and tabulated, I'm just going to scrub out some highlight areas. And it is going to leave some of the staining of color behind, which is all right, because that's what I have in my reference photo. You still see the color underneath a little bit, just a little bit of a gleam.
Background, background, no background, 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 background. People are mostly background. Oh, no background, just splatter.
Ooh, splatter. There's going to be splatter. I can tell you that.
There will be splatter.
I'm really loving this paper. If you guys get a chance to try the Langton Prestige, it's really nice and very robust, and I feel like I can really do a lot to this paper before it starts to give up and pill. In fact, I don't think I've gotten it to pill in any of my projects yet that I've used it on. Not that I've given it a ton of wear and tear, but you usually can start to feel when you're coming up to a paper's limit and it's going to protest.
Jordan Sinclair, do you have any advice for asking companies if I can review some of their products?
Do you like to get free product in return? You're going to be much more successful if you have a good social media following, because that's what they're looking for. They're kind of looking, if they're going to give you product, they want in return some publicity for that, because a lot of people will ask companies for product. I mean, I occasionally do if it's something I'm not intending to buy and people have requested that I review it. If it's something I was going to buy anyway, I'll generally just go ahead and purchase it. But if it's something that it's not something I really need or was going to get, then I will ask if they have a sample for review. And a lot of times companies now have dot cards, so they will be very much more likely to give out the dot cards to review. But I would just send a respectful email. If you have links to where you're going to review it, that would be great, because they're going to want to know who is
watching.
Who's watching. They're going to want to know who is reviewing. So if it's somebody that's always, kind of, if somebody's being very critical of a lot of different companies, they may not send you something to review. They want to make sure that you kind of know your stuff. Then you have experience in the product and the medium that you're reviewing. So if you always paint in acrylics and you want some watercolors to review, they may think, well, this person doesn't really use watercolors. Are they going to give me a fair review? But if if you're always using watercolors, then it's much more likely. But if you're always using artist quality watercolors and they sell more of a craft quality, they may be hesitant just because it's not the market that they're after, and you'll be comparing their stuff against stuff that's much more expensive. But basically just sending a really respectful email, asking them if they have any samples to review, would probably be the best way to go about doing it. I have success, I would say probably 50% of the time when I ask for a sample to review. And usually they'll say yes or they won't respond. So I even wonder if sometimes the emails don't go through, or if I've even emailed the right person. I'm just cleaning up some of my lines here with the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue mix. I did switch to a mimic Kolinsky, which is a synthetic Kolinsky, because, there, I'm going to go back to this one, though. I'd lost my little fine point squirrel one, which I like a little bit better because it holds more paint, so I don't have to reload so often. But whatever small brush you have is going to be fine for this. Do whatever you're comfortable with. And in fact, if you are a brand new beginner, I don't recommend the mimic brushes because they do hold so much water that I think it could be a little bit problematic to get used to, because if you're using a student grade paint and you're using a really soft brush, you may find that you're not getting as much pigment as you want. So if you find yourself in that situation where your brushes are really soft and you're using student grade paint and you just can't seem to get the amount of paint you need, don't throw your paints away. Try a stiffer brush, just like try a brush that's meant for acrylic painting, like a golden Taklon or nylon synthetic. That's going to be a little easier for you to control because you can kind of kick up more paint in the pans. Sometimes student grade paints take a little bit more of an aggressive hand to pull out of their little pans.
Linda DB, is there any technique for adding tube watercolor to palettes to dry?
Squish it in, and I usually will like wet my finger and press it down if it's like really bumpy, because if it's really peaky, it's gonna be a little rougher on your brushes to handle. But you just want to kind of get it in there and fairly flat. And some people put it in on a slant, like they'll put it in kind of like, I put it in, I'm seeing if I have any that's kind of like that. Just kind of put it along the edge and then like kind of put it in a little bit of slant so you have a place for your brush to kind of pull up. I just usually fill the pans right up. And that's what I like to do. But some people like to put just a little drop down. It depends on how committed you are to that palette, I guess, if you're sure you want to keep your paints in there or not. If I'm not sure, if I'm just reviewing a paint and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, if it's going to go into my main palette or not, I'll just put a little squirt just so I can have something to paint from. Brightening up the blue here. Still using that small brush though, so I don't end up putting more paint than I want.
Benny Chavez, this has a sort of stenciled look. Is that what you were going for or had in mind for this painting?
Not really, but I think because there's so many different like parts of the shell, it almost looks like armor kind of put together.
You do look at a close-up photo of, like, if you show them the photo.
Oh yeah, I can show them this. I can.
They do have like a stenciled look to them because they have those joints.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
From their shell.
Yeah. Now I was going for kind of just a loose look. In fact, I think I'm going to start some spatter and then paint in some background areas and just kind of let them let the background go where it wants to go. And if the spatter hits any wet paint, it's going to give me some interesting effects as well, I think. I want a sandy color, so I'm going to go with some yellow ochre. Mixing in just a area on my palette's got quite a bit of paint in it. Anyway, I'm going to grab some ultramarine blue. Those two colors are going to make a very grayed out green. I think I'll add a little bit of that red to it to negate the green. I'm getting kind of like a mud color here, but when you do it intentionally, then it's not really mud anymore because you did it on purpose. A little more ultramarine, so I'm balancing, get the color you want. And now I'm using this number 30 round. It's one of my favorite brushes here. And I'm just going to kind of dab it in here and there, and where it hits a pocket of wet paper, then it's going to kind of do some interesting stuff all on its own. And I like that. I like the look of that a lot.
Oh, the video's kind of choppy.
Oh no! Hopefully it pops back.
Yeah, it's caught up.
You never know. We were having some internet just watching like watching Netflix or whatever, having some issues.
It's weird. Sometimes it'll just be like all pixelated. And,
yeah, it's very strange, especially for the internet package that we buy. It's a little uncalled for. I think I might actually wet some areas too, because I definitely want to have, my brush is very dirty. Kind of want to have some areas where it flows a little bit more. Grab a little of that turquoise because I like it. Whoops, it's wrong color. Let's flick some of that in there. Got a little bit of that in the. This turquoise has a nice green base to it, so it really makes our red stand out. And I like it because it kind of gives you the impression of sand and water.
Laura McAllister, what colors were in your green mixture?
The really grayed one, well, the ones in here would be the gamboge and the turquoise, and the kind of grayish green that I started with, that I was mixing for the sand, that would be yellow ochre and ultramarine blue. I like getting that turquoise in the ground area because it does give it a really, oh, maybe I'll use some salt too once we get this.
Ooh, there you go.
That's really cool to have a nautical type. I like working with the kind of dry next to wet edges so they kind of smear out and just kind of flow out. I think I'm gonna do some yellow ochre on its own just because it's got a kind of a naturally kind of sandy color to it. Maybe mix that with some of that dirtier color that I have there to tone it down. You have any other questions popping up?
Not so far. There was someone asking about the tubes from palettes, and I answered that from months of listening to advice from you and the mods.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to flick some water. Actually, I just want to pull a little color into this area. I'm going to flick on some water, which will give me a little bit of the same technique as a salt, and then I'm actually going to sprinkle in some salt. So
Shani Bush, can you use an HP DeskJet printer to print out on watercolor paper?
There's a couple issues you probably are going to have with that. One, the ink will bleed. So you'll want to print it in like a color that is similar to the color. So if you're doing this, you might want to print it out in a light brown. And then when the ink bleeds, it's not going to give you so much of an issue. If your printer is the kind that folds your paper, like it goes in from underneath and it folds around and comes out, then it's probably going to be too thick and it's going to jam. And I have yet to rescue a jammed paper out of my printer and have it survive. So just kind of keep that in mind. Some people do print on watercolor paper, but I think you have to have the kind of printer that takes the paper in from the back, or you have to use a really lightweight watercolor paper. All right. Now, if I speed the drying up with the salt, it's going to diminish the effect a little bit, but that's pretty wet. I don't know if I'll want to hang around and wait for that to dry. Maybe I'll just dry a little bit of the face area so I can go in and add a little more detail.
C. Wellwood, why salt?
It gives me a really nice texture that I think goes really well with nautical designs, because it kind of almost looks like sand and barnacles, and it's just, I think it's a really flattering texture against the crab for background. You'll see in a second as it starts to dry up in some of the more pigmented areas. I just want to try to dry the face up of the crab a little bit so I can bring in some detail and some sharpness there, and then we can let everything else kind of fade on it, dry on its own. So if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and type the word question and put them right in the chat, and we will get to you. All right, I think the face area is dry enough that I can work around there and not cause any problems. I'm cleaning off my scrubber brush. And I want to lighten up the eyes a little bit. Just clean wet brush, scrub it. You don't want it too wet. You don't want to cause it to bleed, but then you can brighten up certain areas that may have gotten a little too much paint in them. And if you've got everything, like right now, everything is very similar in value. So I think if I lighten up some of the areas in the crab's face, it's going to make it, give it a more of a focal point, because I feel like I've lost my focal point here. And by making the values a little bit different, I'll be able to bring it back. Because if you have a whole painting with everything the same value, it gets kind of uninteresting. It looks more like a background than a finished painting. If you do have that situation, you don't know how to fix it, you can always like collage on top of it or go with another medium such as colored pencils or a pen. We've done that before when we've overworked a painting, and that's a great way to salvage it. But I want to keep this one just watercolor today. I think that looks a little bit better already just by lightening up the face. And now I'm just going to go in with a small brush and some darker kind of blackish color, which I'm mixing with the ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and get some more details put in there.
Amy Knudsen, is there a small set that would be good for flowers?
Yeah, I would try either the Prima Tropicals or the Jane Davenport Brights. Those are really great if you do like art journaling and stuff. Some of the light fastness, I don't know anything about the Prima light fastness because they don't publish that information. Jane Davenport does have that information published for her set, but the Brights are not the best light fastness. So if you're looking for something, I don't think this set here that I'm using, you definitely could do florals with it, but it lacks a really good cool red. So you would definitely want to add that to it if you wanted to use that for florals. The Lucas one would be all right for florals, but if you're only doing florals, you probably have a few colors that you're really not going to use that much. Probably your best bet would be to actually just get the tubes of the colors you think you're going to use. Now you can actually paint with your brushes that you use for lifting. I'm using this to kind of tap on some burnt sienna because I know it's going to give me a little bit of that texture that I want. Because it's basically what I'm doing is dry brushing, and it's leaving the just little bits of paint on the raised surface of the paper. So I'm kind of able to get that nice kind of shelly texture.
Go ahead.
And I'm not going to do too much detail here, but I just want to kind of bring out these little stripes that I kind of lost a few steps earlier in the process, and just kind of have this area detailed so everything else can kind of float into the background.
Chloe Hovley, when you lose your subject, do you want to lighten the subject, not the background?
It depends. You just need to cause some more value contrast. So if darkening the background is good, like if you're painting a white flower and your background's really light, you'd probably want to darken the background so your flower could show up. Like with this, I have so much color in the background. I thought maybe by lightening this face, it would make the claws, it would give us some contrast between the claws and kind of break it out a little bit that way. So it totally depends on what else you have going on in your picture. You want to create the contrast.
Benny Chavez, I took the plunge and bought a set of Mozart brush markers. Any tips or suggestions on where I should begin? I have never used markers for art before.
I would have like a little tile or plate where you can scribble some of them off, and a water brush, just so that like when you're drawing and painting with them, you'll be able to go and get those mid values if you're having a hard time going straight from the marker. It's just going to help you kind of have your set be a little more versatile for you. All right, now I'm going to take a mix of both blues, ultramarine blue and the turquoise that I've been using. And I am just going to throw in some shadow glazes. This is just going over what I've done already, and it's cooling down certain areas and helping me shape the crab legs a little bit. Be careful when you're going over more of an orange color though, because it will want to go brown on you. So I'm trying not to go over any areas that are too orange. Those orangey areas, I'll make like a purple with the ultramarine and the scarlet, because that will be a little more transparent and not quite a true opposite. So it'll give me more of a glaze and it'll be less of a mixture. It'll go less muddy. And I can put some wiggly lines in there that will make it look kind of like the claws are wet.
Kathy Regalado, do you have any tips for getting out of your comfort zone?
I would say go paint somewhere out in nature, because go paint in public. That will get you out of your comfort zone. Take a class of something you don't know how to do yet. Try some different materials. Challenge yourself to just use like 3 different materials that you're not used to using, maybe stuff that you bought on a whim, or put a couple painting ideas like into a jar, just written on a piece of paper into a jar, and then draw from the jar and force yourself to paint whatever, combination of items you drew.
Velma Hutchinson, is it necessary to paint over your paper to make sure the sizing is evenly distributed? No,
it should be. It should come optimal. I'm going to splash some of that red on there. And I think we're just about going to be done, because I don't really want to overwork it.
Ian Jackson, would you gauge texture lines into the shell?
I'm not going to. You could. There aren't really many texture lines in this piece that I'm doing, so probably not for this one. But if there were if it was like a seashell and had a lot of really hard ridges, then yes, maybe. I kind of go with a case-by-case basis on that sort of thing. I'm not liking some of these areas where I have a lot of white, so any place where I feel like the white is out of place, I'm just touching it up with a little bit of paint or pulling some of the wet paint around. I will take a photo of this and post it on my blog so that you'll get to see the dry finished painting, because it's not dry yet, and it will look a lot better when it dries. You can start to see the salt texture here, right in there. If you see the almost like little kind of little cauliflowers there that are made in there from where the salt is starting to dry. I'll try to force it a little bit with my heat gun, but that's pretty much going to do it. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them, because I am going to wrap it up. This will take a while to dry on its own, and I really don't want to sitting here and watching paint dry. Probably not how you want to spend your afternoon.
There's other things we could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to soften those splatters a little bit.
Someone thought naming the crab would make me not want to eat him. Delicious.
Probably depends on what you name him.
It doesn't matter. It just adds that personal touch to your meal, because you really got to know the animal. It's better that way. I say that to Lindsay because she's a vegan and she just cringes on the inside, but she's so nice she doesn't say anything.
I don't know if I ever had crab meat as a child, even before I became a vegetarian. Now I might go in after it's all dry and just sharpen up some edges, but that's something you'd want to determine after it's all dry and you've had a chance to see it. It's best if you can let it sit for a day or two before you make any adjustments, just because you get so used to looking at something that it can be very difficult to tell what it really needs. But I think I've dried this area enough that you can see the texture from the salt. And again, please go back to my blog. Probably in a couple hours, I'll have a picture up of it all dry. And you can just kind of see just these little kind of watermarks here from the salt. I don't want to flick it off yet because I'm going to smear it through some wet paint. But once it's all dry, what I like to do is take like an old credit card and scrape off the salt, because I tend to not smear things. If I rub it with my hands, it seems like I might have a drop of water or something on my hands. I'll tend to kind of rub the paint off the top of the salt and slide it into something. So I find that a credit card is the best way to remove it. Sometimes it almost glues down to your paper and it's tough to just brush off. So that would be my tip there. Any more questions, or are we good? All right, great. Well, I want to thank everyone that joined live, and like I said, photo on my blog of the dried finished paintings, so you can have a good look at that. And I want to thank jerrysartorama.com for sponsoring this video. You can find all the supplies I used over there and links to them in the video description. Also a link to the reference photo and the printable pattern so that you can trace it if you don't feel like drawing it out. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy crafting.